Superimpose edit places a clip on top of another clip on the timeline. So when you superimpose a clip, it gets placed in a new track, and that track is directly above the track that you're working in. So when you superimpose a clip on top of a clip in track 1, it automatically creates a track 2 and superimposes the incoming clip into that track over the clip that you've just selected in the timeline. So I'm going to undo that and talk through the superimpose in a little bit more detail. So superimpose is going to take its 3 points. It's going to have the clip that it's being superimposed, and that clip is going to by default have an in point and an out point just at the extremities of the clip itself. Now in the viewer, what you can do is you can specify an in or an out. So if I put an out point here, and I'm just going to put it where the lake just comes into view so we'll be able to see exactly what we're looking at. So I'll put an in point there. Now I'm going to go over and drag it to superimpose. When I go to the start of this clip, you'll see that it's after using the in point from my incoming clip, which I put in the browser, and the in and the out points of the target clip in the timeline. Now I didn't have to put an in and an out point here, so I can clear these in and out points by hitting Alt and X and leave the playhead over the clip. In that way I'm selecting this clip just by having the playhead over it. Final Cut Pro knows that it has an in and an out, so when I superimpose it, it will do the exact same thing. Okay, so it's taking its point 1, point 2, and point 3. Now, similarly with the backtime edit, I can delete my in point here, and I can place an out point. So I put an out point where the lake is fully visible, and I'm going to just delete the clip that I've superimposed. Now when I drag this clip to superimpose, it's going to place the out point that I've selected here in the incoming clip here in the viewer is going to be matched up with the out point or the end of this clip. So when I click and drag that over to superimpose, and if I go to the last frame of that clip, you'll see that in the timeline it's after doing a backtime edit where the end of the clip is the important part here, and I've specified that as being important by putting an out point instead of an in point. So to do a superimpose edit, first of all you need to have a clip selected in the timeline, either by just placing the playhead over it, or you could put an in and an out at either end of it, and having an in or an out on the clip that you want to bring in. Now, since we're dealing with multiple tracks with superimpose, it's worth pointing out that when you have tracks in Final Cut Pro, you can have any number of tracks vertically going up here, then you can select which track is your target track. Now you can see here that V1 has a little button attached to it on the left. If I were, for instance, to click V2, this is now my target track. So if I was to do that, superimpose again, it's after superimposing onto a third track. Now the reason that it didn't superimpose to the perfect length of my clip here is because I hadn't selected a particular clip. That because I'm selecting a different target to superimpose on top of, it doesn't have a clip in it that I can look for in and out points. So what Final Cut Pro has done here is it has looked for the playhead position, so that's specifying an in point, and it looked to the in point being the first frame of my clip in the viewer, my out point being my out point in the viewer, and it's after looking at this duration, it's after superimposing it at this point on the timeline over track 2. So when you're dealing with superimposing, you're dealing with multiple tracks, so it's important to remember that if you want to select this track as the track that's being used to be superimposed on top of, that you have it selected here on the left. Now superimpose doesn't have to be just replacing a track. Generally speaking, that's kind of one of its main uses, is when you want to superimpose one clip on top of another. But just like any 3-point editing, if you have an in point and an out point selected in your timeline and an in point or an out point selected in your viewer, and you go over to superimpose it's going to superimpose that clip over the point in the timeline on your selected track. So use the same logic that you would for an insert or an overwrite edit, but in this instance you're not just placing it on the same track, you're superimposing it onto a track above your selected track, and that's superimposing clips. And that this particular tool or technique comes into its own when you're dealing with composites. Just quickly while I'm at it, I'll just show you what I mean by that. A composite is when you have one clip over another and you can do something like an opacity mix. So you can see now in the canvas that I've got a nice kind of montage style image with one faded down over the other. And that's done through using the superimpose edit.